Welcome, everyone, to the 5 Tips and Tricks for Careers in Athletics. I am your host, Dr. Maury Mosovitz, with my all-time favorite, most best co-host of all times, Jen Albanese. Welcome, Jen.
Hello, Maury. How are you? What's going
Oh, doing
on?
great. What, doing lovely.
Yes, we got a good one today. I'm excited.
Yes. So Sasha Graham, an amazing storyteller, someone focused on sports, and just doing amazing, exciting things with sports is coming on. So everyone can learn about podcasting, which we're learning a little bit about over the last couple months here, but also just some amazing things that she has to tell us from
Yeah.
being in the world of sports.
So exciting to chat with. So exciting to get the opportunity to chat with her. She's a great podcaster and has made some really great connections with some people. So excited to have that conversation with her and learn and hopefully help our audience learn as well. So yeah, it's a
Absolutely.
good one today. But as you can see, we're very like, it looks like
I
we're
know
bundled
anyone
up.
on YouTube is going to see that there are 2 huge sweaters that are being worn today. So for the people listening, like these are the most gigantic sweaters, and I was like, clearly the YouTube people are going to see that it is freezing where we live right now.
Oh, like freezing isn't even the word, Maury. It's literally negative degrees.
I was gonna say I was talking to my parents -4 this morning while my daughter was getting on the bus.
Yeah. Yeah, it literally freezing and honestly like the whole country at this point. And I know it's
Yeah.
winter, but like everybody there's like snow in Florida, which is insane. Which, they're like we never see snow. Like how does this even like how do people even function? I'm like, "Oh, it's nothing.
I
We're
know.
experts up here with it." So,
I was listening to someone talk about how one place in Florida they don't even have plows, so they like can't even move snow because they've
yeah.
never had snow like in the history of that area ever to
Yeah,
like recorded record.
and the whole city like shuts down. It's like we were just saying like today our kids went to school and it was like -4 degrees. It was like no big deal, like just go to school.
Yeah.
Like we get a couple feet of snow, it's like no big deal, we just plow it and we keep on going on our day. And other
Which is
parts of the
funny because where
country.
I grew up, it was like, okay, there's an inch of snow, like everything's shut down. They have to go to the grocery stores. It's like a mass rush on the stores, and there's no toilet paper or milk left, which I always wonder, like, what's that
Well, it
going to
was
make
like
the difference
I mean,
between?
like an apocalypse. We had snow. It's not, but I could totally
And
see your
then
parents doing that.
you grew up, and you're like trudging through 8 feet of snow and to go to your school.
Yeah, I literally had no fear of that. I was like, whatever, it's totally fine, no big deal.
Yeah.
So that's too funny. But yeah, so hopefully it'll warm up a little bit. But yeah, our big sweaters are very
Yes,
cozy and
our big
comfy in the
sweaters. I had a lot of someone called it a smoking sweater today, which I was like, I think you mean smoking jacket, but
I was gonna say smoking jacket,
yes, I
right?
had a lot of comments about my sweater today, but I was comfortable, so they
Yeah,
can
I mean, it
enjoy
was
that.
freezing. Even if you're inside, I feel like it's freezing when it's like -degrees. So
Yes,
it is what it is. And then we have our kids who like want to go out in just a hoodie. And I'm like,
I know.
no, Michael, it's -8 degrees outside, buddy. You have to wear a long sleeve shirt, a sweatshirt, and a coat, not just
Yeah,
your sweatshirt.
I'm just trying to make my kids put on their coat and their hats and forcing them. So it's
And then
the
it was like we literally argued about everything this morning. So
yeah.
I hope everyone else is also suffering
Yes.
like I
Hope
am.
you're no, we hope you're warm and there's no suffering. But
Yeah.
to talk about warmth, our guest, a native of or not, lives in Arizona right now, so hopefully she is at least warm where we are
Yeah,
freezing,
of
and we
course.
will. Yes, we will get to her after these messages.
Are you a loyal 5 Tips and Tricks podcast listener? If not, now is the time to start. Get all your info and fun content on the podcast by following us on all our social channels at @AthCareerPod. The 5 Tips and Tricks podcast is a part of Athletic Career Consulting. Make sure to reach out to us. The one-stop shop for everything is our website, www.athcareer.com. Remember, follow and like us on @AthCareerPod, rate and review us, and get all your info at www.athcareer.com. Okay, everybody, welcome back. Maury, let's introduce our guest for today.
Very excited. Today's guest is an author, storyteller, and podcaster with a passion for sports. She's a former executive at Walt Disney Studios, and her writing has been featured in magazines, newspapers, and on television. Raised on a farm in Oregon with her 3 siblings, a horse named Jim, and a barn cat named Peanut Butter, she brings a unique perspective to everything she does. After attending the University of San Francisco, she went on to work as a television writer, producer, and publicist in San Francisco. It was during the publicity tour for Whitney Wins Everything, part of her children's book series, Tiny Najias, that she was inspired to launch an award-winning podcast, Sports Will Save Us All. On the podcast, she shares captivating stories about unifying powers of sport and profound impacts they have on our lives. Happy to welcome Sasha Graham to the podcast. Welcome, Sasha.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Hi, Sasha.
This is very exciting for Jen and I. We talked about how much we enjoyed your podcast and the stories that you tell, and really felt it would be awesome to get you on to share some of your perspectives with the people that listen to ours.
Oh, heck yeah. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great. We're so excited to kind of dive in with you. This will be great. So, yeah.
So we don't want to spend too much time, but throw out some of the tips that you have for those people that are interested in doing very similar things to you do, stories about sports or things that relate to just a unique way of looking at athletics or sports.
Heck yeah. This is like my favorite thing to talk about. So here we go, like sports and podcasting, right? So, I know that there is a ton of advice out there just about, how to be good in business or how to even work in sports, like in this general sense of what to do. And so I thought that what your listeners might appreciate would be specifically with a sports podcast. Like so many people I talk to say, oh my gosh, I would love to have a sports podcast. That looks like so much fun. And it is. I understand why they want one because it's the best job ever. So the first tip that I have when it comes to actually starting a sports podcast is to spend way more time than you think you need to on picking the name. Here's why. The name of your podcast, and this sounds really obvious, I think, but the name of your podcast is going to guide you, first of all. It will attract guests and their publicists and listeners to your show. I cannot tell you how many guests I have had on the show that are way out of my league, right? That are just attracted because the idea of sports will save us all really resonates with them. And they're like,
exactly.
Oh, sports saved my life. Like, I want to talk to this person. Like, this is something I want to talk about. So on the flip side of that, I have seen so many shows where either the name is a little too clever and, we are simple folk. We need things spelled out for us.
You need to know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, like you've got this much time during the day and you want to know what this show is that you're going to be listening to. So that is, don't make it too clever. Make sure it's easy to remember and easy to spell. This is another thing that I run into all the time is that I will hear somebody mention a show or I will, come across a show and then look it up later. And the spelling just it leaves me absolutely lost because whatever it is, I'm thinking of one in particular that I don't want to call her out. It's not around
I understand.
Anymore, but it was her name and she used her name that was very similar to another word, right? It was a homophone to another word. Only her name wasn't spelled like the word. So when you went to look up her podcast, it was just
you couldn't find it.
It was so hard to find. And I mean, I knew the show and I still couldn't find it. So make sure it's easy to spell. Funky spellings, double entendres, weird symbols. Like I've even seen people put like weird symbols in, which might look great in your artwork. But then when you go to find it on, Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, like how do I?
You can't find it.
It's hard, right?
Symbol or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my first piece of advice would be to really think about it. Once you have landed on a few that you like, run them past people. See what their impression is of this title, right? Like what reaction do they have? Like if I say to you, sports will save us all. I had this woman one time, actually, when she found out the name of my show, she looked at me, she goes, oh, I should not come on your show. And I said, why? And she said, oh, I've dated so many professional athletes.
Oh,
God. I was like, are you kidding me? You're exactly who I want for my show. Like, that is a great story.
It's a good story.
Yeah, that's like the antithesis of sports will save us all, right?
Yeah, and she's like, sports is not saving me. But that's okay.
but it had a reaction, right? And that's
Yeah.
what you want. You want it to have some, for people to really react to it. Then what you want to do is look up and make sure it's available everywhere,
Yeah.
right? So look it up in the podcast host, make sure, or in the, platform. So look it up in Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If there's already 5 podcasts with a really similar name or the same name, that you thought was so clever, find something else, because you
Yeah.
want to be instantly recognizable. Incredibly, Sports Will Save Us All was not only available, but then, the website was available, and the Instagram was available, and the YouTube was available. So having that whole thing, you want, even if you don't think that you need all of those things at the get-go,
Right.
you want to have them available if you want them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you were going through the process, like what hit your mind about getting your name of your podcast going? Like, and I know you were inspired during your book tour, but what was that trigger point for you that really engaged you, that said, this is something I want to go towards with the name?
As far as the title goes, it was interesting because I had different variations on that theme. So like, sports will save the world, different things like that. And when I talked to people and I said, I would try it out, right? So I would say, so I'm thinking about starting this podcast called Sports Will Save Us All. That was the one that people really reacted to, and that I felt was sort of a guiding principle for what my show was going to be all about. So it really, the example of this woman who dated the professional athletes, while funny, really, I talk to people all the time whose lives have just been profoundly impacted by sports, whether they were an athlete or a coach or a fan, or, they watched games growing up with their grandfather, or, they were there before Title IX, whatever it is,
right.
That sports have affected them. And so the title really, I think, is very, very apt for what I'm doing.
Awesome.
And I think the title just in itself, like, everybody can be connected in some way to sports. Like you said, there's something in your life that you had a connection with sports. So even if whether you like it or you don't like it or whatever the memory is you have, you can connect with it. So that's why I feel like that title so like sticks with people, because there's some connection. Everybody has some connection with sports.
It's
so
true.
I think
it's
that's
true.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
We loved it, or we wouldn't ask you on. So
I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh crap, do we like the title of our podcast?
I want to see it too.
I was like, we asked people and they liked it. I'm like, oh God, I hope she likes it. I'm like,
go straight to the heart of it.
Right? I know.
That's
okay.
That rolls us right into our second tip. You want me to?
I was gonna say we got to get into the second one.
Yeah.
Here we go. Tip number 2. So before you launch, so you've got your title. Before you launch, I really recommend that you cover all of these pieces that you're going to need once the podcast is out there. Here's what I'm talking about. We get really excited to talk to people and to talk to guests and to drop our first episode and get it out there and, see it pop up on Spotify. And that's really, really exciting. If you can take the time to plan, and Jen is the marketing person, I'm sure that this resonates with you, but if you can take the time to figure out your logo, to figure out your cover art, your trailer, get your headshots taken, figure out your calendar, like what is your show going to look like, right? Get your bio written, all of these pieces that maybe you're not going to need on day 1, but you're going to need on day 30, or you're going to need on day 60. And getting them done in advance will just help to narrow in your focus, right? So that when you're talking about your podcast, and in this case, your sports podcast, you know what you're talking about. Because so many times I talk to people and they have an idea of what they're going to do. They don't really know, which is great. That's perfect. Ideas are where all of this starts and, where it all grows from. But the more you can get those, collaterals or whatever you want to call them in place in advance, the better positioned you are going to be down the road. And we talk in my family a lot about your future self thanking your present self, right? So I'll say to myself, okay, this kind of sucks right now, but my future self is going to be so happy with my present self, right?
Yeah.
And then, when I'm in the future, I'll be like, ooh, boy, I'm into that past self. She did me a solid here, right?
I remember so distinctly when we were starting this, and we had got all together. We're getting our calendar, and we've already kind of done our first episode, but it was probably 2 months, Jen, before we actually put out the episode. And that was like, it was just such a buildup. And then when the clock hit and it was released for the first time, it was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Like, did all this planning, was it worthwhile? The website, the social media setups, but it's very rewarding at the end of it, but it's a lot of work. I don't think everybody realizes that, if you want to see it turn into a strong product, you got to put in a good amount of effort.
Right, because it's one of those things, it reminds me a little bit of actors, that when you see an actor in a movie, you're like, oh, I could totally do that, right? Like I walk around and talk every day. Yeah. And then you try to act, right? You try to be in your first show and you're like, I'm terrible at this.
That's one thing you'll not be seeing us in an act. I know Jen might, not me.
No, I'm good.
I don't know. I now I kind of want it to happen just because you said that it won't.
You're going to have to put a lot, you'll have to come from Arizona to coach us here, because I don't think it's going to happen naturally.
I mean, I'm a decent coach in some things, but I think acting that's not my wheelhouse. But I think that podcasting is the same thing. That people hear people on podcasts, and good podcasters make you feel like you're just sitting in the room while people are having a conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And so people do the same thing where they're like, well, I have conversations all the time, so I could totally do this, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's easy to forget that there is a ton of work behind the scenes that goes into every episode, and that if you are not willing to do that part of it, and if that part doesn't bring you joy, then the other part isn't going to be enough to sustain it.
You have to enjoy the whole package. It's just not one part.
Yeah. And I will say, this is sort of a, tip 2.A, but it's like, you don't have to do every part of it. That if there's something that you really, really loathe, find somebody else to do it. You can find somebody else to, do your editing if editing isn't your jam. And you can find somebody else to create your logo if graphic design isn't your thing, right?
Yep.
You just talked about Jen and my relationship all together. Like, I was nervous about doing the podcast, and Jen's like, I want to be a podcast host. I was like, I want to get a message out about teaching people about athletics. And so like that, she does the marketing, I do the editing. Like, you can find your people.
I was gonna say, it's a good partnership. It's funny when you made the comment about like getting your headshots done. Like, I made Maury take nice photos, and he was like, "Why are we doing this? We're never going to use this." And I'm like, "Now we use it." I'm like, "See what I tell you."
Well, and it's interesting because having someone to push you like that is really, really important, and having somebody to hold you accountable. And that is. That is sort of in that general advice bucket, but it certainly applies to podcasting.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, you're making me remember some great stories. So number 3, I'm waiting for bring back the next thought as we go through it.
All right, here we go. So my next tip, I guess, is about booking guests. And here is the reality, sports fans. I'm used to calling my sports family on the show. So I almost addressed your audience as the sports fam, which, you know what, they're part of the family now. So
we appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, you know what? This family is way big enough for everybody. Like I'm a room at the table for everybody. Don't be afraid to ask people to be guests on your podcast. Sports people are the very, very best people. Like, everybody who's involved in sports, with like just so few exceptions, are people who understand what it means to be hustling for a dream. And they're people who understand what it means to work hard. And also, they automatically have something in common with you. If you want to start a sports podcast, like, you are going after guests who have already bought in to the same thing that you've bought into. So I have been astounded at how eager people are to come on the show. And even, 2.5 years ago, when I would email people and I'd be like, Christine D'Erclay is a perfect example. She's a really famous Peloton instructor, absolutely beloved. I hadn't launched my show yet. My sister-in-law emails me, right? Because I'm sure that you're getting this now too, where people email you with just this like pie in the sky. Like,
I literally just got one before we got on air.
you know who you should have on, and it's like, well, do you have a connection? You know, absolutely, make an introduction over email. And they're like, oh, well, I don't know them. I would like to hear you talk to them.
Sounds great.
Like, oh. Yeah, totally.
Sounds like all of our family just like emailing us. Get Simone Biles on your podcast. I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay, I have a good Simone Biles story for you as soon as I finish this, which is just that, Christine Erklay was amazing, and she came on the show with, it was an unproven entity, and since then, like, I've proven myself many times, but for whatever reason, she said yes, and she then came back on the show a year later, and incredible guest,
so awesome,
so incredible. My Simone Biles story was that I was giving blood one day. I was reading a book called Sugar Ball that a guest had written, and in anticipation of him coming on, and I start chatting with this guy who's also there, and he's giving blood, and so we're chatting, by talent, and we started talking about sports, and he said, well, my I think it was his cousin played baseball. And I said, really? And I said, is it anybody that I would have heard of? And because he was talking about how this cousin had played in the Negro Leagues, and that then he had gone down to, he had gone down to like South America to play because they played him down there. And I said, is it anybody I would have heard of? And he said it was freaking Hank Aaron.
Oh,
and I was like,
oh my God.
I've heard of him.
No big deal.
Hank Aaron. And so then we're talking about this, and I was like, that is wild. So then he starts talking about how his niece is a gymnast. So this guy's African American, and I'm like going through my head, and I'm like, okay, there just aren't that many.
Not many,
going to the Olympic trials.
Yeah.
And finally, I looked down, and I was like, I have to ask, who's your niece? And he was like, oh, Simone Biles.
You're like, wait a minute.
This guy hit the jackpot on athletics affiliation.
Except the poor guy isn't sporty. So he said, I always suffer by comparisons because then everybody wants to know like what sport I play.
Well, he definitely shouldn't compare. Even if he's a half decent athlete, he's got a real problem.
I know, right?
That's incredible.
Yeah, you tap out at that point. Like
at that point, you're like, no, I'm done.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's incredible. Oh my gosh,
it's a great story.
It was very fun, but it's a good example of, just talking to people, and that you can meet people anywhere, and everybody has a story. And if you start talking about sports, it's just a very, very easy way to start that conversation. I mean, the two of you know that, better than anybody.
Yeah, it's a connection point, whether it's through your career and what you're doing is extending that more into storytelling and connecting people. But we talk about it all the time on the podcast about from a relationship standpoint, you have this common factor about what you're doing and the interests that you have. And so it's this kind of connective glue that you talk about more broadly and how it affects us all through the world. So it's awesome.
Yeah, it's magic. It's absolutely magic. In that same vein of booking guests, I would tell every single person to sign up for podmatch.com. It's awesome. It's the one place that I send people. It is an incredible, it's sort of a dating service for podcast guests and podcast hosts, right?
That's awesome.
So,
I'm writing this down right now. Podmatch.
There you go.
It's beautifully run. Everybody, like all their information is there. So you can take a look, and, the commitment is less severe than dating. So, you can reach out to whoever you want, and they can reach out to you. Their photos are there ready to download. It does so much of the work for you, and for hosts it's really inexpensive to sign up, and it is a really, really good way to find high quality guests who are interested in being on your show. So It's sort of a cheat code to get in there, because
that's great.
I will really argue that a lot of times the guests that you find yourself that maybe haven't been on a podcast before are going to be some of your best guests. But if you're hosting a weekly podcast, it's just a lot of humans who you need sitting in that chair. Yeah. And so podmatch.com is, it just takes a ton of the work out of the process. So I would always highly recommend.
That's a trick for us. We're adding that one to our list for sure.
We're learning so much right now. I'm learning so much right now.
That is, that brings me great, great joy, because I have learned so much from so many people who have been so generous with what they know and sharing their expertise that I'm really happy to pass them along. We ready for number 4?
I was gonna say we're at number 4. You're ahead of me. I was gonna go to Jen. I'm like, we're 4, right? You already got it.
She does this all the time.
She's a professional. I know. We have to remember
what she's doing.
So this one is a little bit more in the general, but the tip is that you will get out of it almost directly proportionally what you put into it. So a lot of people who I talk to, and this went for when I was writing children's books, and now that I have the show, that they think that all they have to do is create the product and it will be huge, that they're going to be, the next new heights or whatever. And the reality is that you will be exactly as successful as you work. And that goes for just almost every aspect of the podcast. But one of the things that I really, really recommend is that in this process that you respect your guests, because the person who is sitting down across from you, not only are they giving of their time and their expertise, but they also know other people. And you never know the guy sitting next to you giving blood who his freaking niece is, right?
You'll have Simone Biles on the next day.
It's just wild. And so if you treat every single person who comes on your show, whether they're a Sasha Graham or a Simone Biles, like they're Simone Biles, it only benefits you. And I mean, again, it's funny, I've been in this pro football interview phase recently leading up to the Super Bowl, and I got an email today from somebody who's a big name, and it was just because these other guys who I've had on talking about football, that people heard this. And so that is tip number 4, is do your research. Know where you can dig deeper. So many of these people have done other shows, other podcasts. Listen to other interviews they've done. If you start hearing them when you're interviewing them, giving you the same answer they give on every single show, stop them.
It's not going to be the story that you're looking to tell, or do something that you're looking to make it unique for what you're doing.
Right. And it's more fun for the guest. When I can't tell you how many times I've heard, I've never told that story before. Like,
we've had a couple of those ourselves.
Oh, is that the best?
It's like, wow, it's like, this is something new. And some of the people we've known for a long time, we never knew about it. So
we're like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. We're learning about you. And they're like, wait a minute, we worked with you for 10 years. What do you mean?
It's so true. There is something about the medium of podcasting that opens people up and gives you this opportunity. And I just really love it when people, just take advantage of that opportunity, because, we're all here to build relationships, right?
Yeah.
And what I would think about is not just podcasting, and clearly you're doing an amazing job at it. You're doing it, but for anyone that's in a professional setting and doing something that you're engaging with people, how important it is to respect those that you're working with and connect and make those connections. Because we've said it before, that might lead you to another job. It might lead you to another guest. It might lead you to any of these places in your life, especially in sports. Because as we talked about, it's a community. Like it's a group of people in athletics that there's only the Kevin Bacon effect, like 1 degree of separation or whatever. Like I was listening to you talk about Arizona State, and we have a friend that's really close. I was like, I'm pretty sure I know a friend that is very close with that person. So you never know what it's going to lead to and how important it is. And if you're doing a podcast and you're looking to get more guests, or if you're looking to advance your career and just build on that community that you're developing. So awesome.
And just sort of like as a way to exist in the world, right?
Yeah.
How awesome does it feel? It's so fun to make those connections.
Yeah.
It's a much better way to live.
Relationships are key. Always. And in any area of life. Like you said, it's not just in your career, it's in any area of life. So that's great.
Right.
Okay, Jen, it's the big one. Throw the last big question at Sasha.
Last question for you, Sasha. So what do you know now that you wish you knew then? So what do you know now that you wish you knew when you first started in your career, whether it's in podcasting or in anything?
Right. So this is such a great question, because what I thought of immediately was that old adage of, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? Because what that implies is that the fear of failure stops us from doing things. And I think that that's really true in sports, that a lot of times this idea of, the people who go really far are the people who don't think they're going to fail, right? They decide they're going to do it, and
they're confident to it. They believe.
No fear.
So I think that what I know now that I didn't know then was that success in podcasting would look much, much different from what I thought it was going to look like. Which is to say, I thought that success would be having huge numbers. So we recently hit the top 5% of all podcasts in the world. Which is just,
that's incredible. Congratulations.
Bananas.
That's amazing.
I mean, that sounds like success. 3.5 million podcasts in the world, like top 5%. That sounds like success.
Yeah.
But it turns out that I heard somebody say once that, like, looking at your podcast numbers is like getting on the scale. You're never going to like what you see. Right?
Exactly.
Maury, listen to that.
It's a very strange phenomenon, which is that, you get more listeners and all you want is more listeners. Right. And then, if you get a little dip, then it's like putting on 5 pounds where you're like, what in the world happened? What happened?
What did we do wrong? Yeah.
We're doing everything exactly the same. Like, it's the equivalent of my workout isn't working anymore. Well, of course it is. It's just that sometimes you gain 5 pounds. Like, it was Thanksgiving.
Right.
So so that's what I thought success would look like. I thought success would look like having a lot of listeners, being able to sell ads, get sponsorships, have all these things. What success has actually looked like is what we were talking about before, which is the fun, the joy, and the connection that podcasting brings. And I think that is true for most careers in sports. We went to a Valley Suns. We have a new G League here in Phoenix called the Valley Suns, not to be confused with the Phoenix Suns, but the Valley Suns is our new development league. And I had developed a relationship with one of the guys who works there. And so took my family. It was over the holiday break and we went to the game, and this guy came and found us in the stands. Right.
Oh,
and so chopping it up with this guy who's, works for the G League. And it was amazing how that little contact was so powerful. Mm-hmm. And I get that just every single day now. Like, there are so many people in my life now who weren't in my life 2.5 years ago, who are just incredible. I mean, they are working in, sports for people with disabilities, or they're working for the Phoenix Suns, or they're working for, it just is, they're all over the place. And I think that if I had known that piece of it, if success, instead of being defined by, a dollar amount or by, a podcast listener downloads, if I had realized, I don't know if it would have done anything differently, but I'm sure glad that it worked out this way, because it's incredible.
You can hear it in your episodes and the way that you talk and the energy you bring, like that, I think makes the difference. And you can tell that it's become an important part of your life. And I think that that's a fun thing. And whether you're doing this as your career or you do it as a part-time thing and you have the joy in it, like, clearly it leads to good things. So what a good tip.
I was just going to say, no, go ahead.
I was going to put out to your listeners also that a huge part of what I do is helping other people. So if anybody ever wants any advice on sports podcasting, please, please, please reach out to me. Send me an email at sportswillsaveusall@gmail.com. You can find me via the website, sportswillsaveusall.com. Like, I am really, really not only willing to help you, but happy to help you.
And we recommend, there's some great sports stories out there, some pretty inspirational things that you've done. So definitely check it out for those people who have not seen it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, I can see the passion. Like, when you talk about sports, it's about passion, and I can hear the passion in your voice and see it in your face, for those of you who are watching on YouTube. But like, if you look, like, there's the passion there, and that's inspiring, and it's like motivating. And I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do all of these things for this podcast now, because this is incredible. incredible. So it's just awesome. And you're right about the whole success. It's not about the numbers. It's about like the connections and the way that it makes you feel. And for me, that's been a huge piece of this. So this has been really great.
Yeah.
So,
and I think too, that idea that there's plenty of room at the table for all of us, that you guys doing what you're doing is incredible, and people lifting each other up in sports is nothing new. And
100%.
So that part of it, it's just sports will save us all.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's perfect.
I feel like that's the perfect place to land this. So thank you again, Sasha, for coming on. And we're going to definitely keep track of your podcast and see all the great things. You're talking about the Super Bowl coming up. We'll be looking forward to some of those NFL interviews. So they'll be on our listening list. And with that, thanks everyone for listening. Jen, throw out our socials and everything going out there.
Yes, absolutely. Again, this has been great. So thank you, Sasha, and make sure everybody's following all of our socials at @AthCareerPod. And we will see you again soon. Thanks again, Sasha.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a blast.
Bye, everyone. If you like the 5 Tips and Tricks podcast, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. You can rate and review us, including questions that may be answered on future episodes. The 5 Tips and Tricks podcast for careers in athletics is part of Athletic Career Consulting. Check us out at www.athcareer.com. Don't forget to follow and like us on your top social media platforms.